Hello, everyone. Welcome back to PTMEAL podcast. This is part two of the recap of the batch of conversations I had for this season. We'll hear again highlights from our recent guests. But before that, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, please do so in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and YouTube, or in whatever podcast apps you're listening to. And please do follow us in our social media in Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So, um, first, you hear Reiza Dejito talk about compassion fatigue in her work as a humanitarian worker and what keeps her motivated. Milani Purugganan shared her realization why she likes being a prosthetist and orthotist. Eugene Octaviano discussed different answers to the question, what is functional training? And lastly, Daria Oller discussed evaluation and assessment approaches for patients that may or may not have long COVID. So let's take a listen. What keeps you moving forward? What keeps you in that area, and say that I'll keep on doing this. I'll keep on helping people.
Yes, so Johan, I think more than 75% of humanitarian workers have a mental, how to call it, mental problems, I would
Mhm.
say. Yeah, let's say,
Mhm.
or psychosocial problems,
Mhm.
one way or the other.
Mhm.
And this is not easy
Mhm.
because, we get burnt out a
Right.
lot and we still continue to work
Mhm.
because we basically what we say, if we stop working, there's going to be um, far-reaching impacts,
Mhm.
if we stop working. So we kind of continue to work, and we also suffer with what we call compassion fatigue.
Right.
So I think this is also, I mean, even with clinicians in the
Mhm.
hospitals, we suffer compassion fatigue
Mhm.
most of the time when we're seeing a lot of suffering, for example. So we do value self-care,
Mhm.
and many of the organizations have started to have this well-being policy where we are provided with at least the opportunity to access psychologists or psychiatrists,
Mhm.
for example, for us to be able to speak with them if needed.
Mhm.
And the new breed of managers and leaders in the humanitarian world are becoming more and more into this, really taking care
Mhm.
of the team for you to
Mhm.
be able to take care of others.
Right.
Yeah, we do a lot of, let's say, fun things, I would say. In the Philippines, we did a lot of karaoke.
Mhm.
But at some point, some have it easy than others. I mean, for me personally, um, I actually had to be treated by a psychiatrist, and also had to take some medications to manage my anxiety and
Mhm.
PTSD, actually, because in 2016 I was caught up with my team in the middle of a crisis, or like a
Mhm.
civil war, for
Mhm.
example. So it was a
Right.
very difficult moment for us. We the our neighbor was bombed and things like that. There was lots of people dying, and
Wow.
so it was difficult for us. We were eventually evacuated, of course, but then it took a toll, and I couldn't talk about the experience for 1 year, and I had
Mhm.
to see professionals for
Mhm.
that, and
Right.
be really really treated. So many of us are also going this way.
Mhm.
But yeah, somehow you just kind of toil on. You just continue, because this is something that I think I would really see myself doing until I retire, I guess. And even when I retire, I was actually thinking and telling my husband, maybe when I retire, or when we retire, we can probably set up our own, or create our own NGO, in the
Mm.
just to continue.
What you started.
Yeah, exactly.
Ano naman yung other qualities that you think you have na makes you, made you stay in that career?
Qualities ko?
Mm-hmm.
Alright. Actually, napaisip ako doon na ano bang qualities ko that made me stay. Siguro kasi,
Or qualities that make you enjoy doing what you're doing right now.
Alright. Ngayon kasi, after I graduated, hindi ko naman sinasabing nagsispecialize ako for pedia na orthosis. Alright, hindi ko naman sinasabing ganun. Pero that's what I enjoy the most. Siguro it helped a lot na yun talaga yung parang lumaki ako sa big family with a lot of kids. So naiintindihan ko kung gaano dapat kasigla yung isang bata, isang baby. So pag nakakakita ako ng someone na I know na at this age dapat ganito na yung ginagawa niya but wasn't able to because of medical condition. So parang yun yung quality ko na parang gustong-gusto ko siyang gawan. Or basta pag nakakita lang ako sa labas na pwede siyang magganitong device kahit na nakikita ko lang siya lumalakad sometimes sa church, sa mall. So I think yun yung pinaka-quality na ngayon ko lang naisip because of your question na yun pala, kaya pala gustong-gusto ko ng pediatric orthosis. So I think yun talaga.
Nakakatuwa naman yung question, yung sagot mo na yan. Yeah, when you see a child walking,
parang automatic po pasok sa isip ko na ganito yung gait niya. I think magiging benefit pag ganito. Yung parang gano'n, na it comes na usual na lang. Hindi na siya yung pag-iisipan mo. Parang gano'n.
Nakakatawa kasi gano'n din kami mga PT. Pag nakakita kami mga naglalakad, nag-a-analyze na kami agad ng naisip nyo na agad ano yung device na pwede niyang gamitin.
Ano pwede niyang gamitin. Tapos syempre, di ba, para ikaw, you keep it to yourself, pero hopefully, makita pa siya ulit. So, pag nakita ka ng other child na lumapit sa yung ganito, ganito yung nakita ko. So, parang alam ko na paano siya i-handle. Yung mga gano'n.
Nice. Ano ba ang tamang pagkakaintindi sa functional training?
Ang daming pwedeng daan paano ko sasagutin kasi yan eh. I could go with, a marketing perspective ng functional training, which is one of the most prominent reason bakit nagkaroon ng ganitong, ano tawag sa Tagalog? Ganong misconception of functional training. It's actually out of marketing. I would understand that naming something and communicating something easily to the layperson makes sense. I believe in that. Ang problema nga lang, medyo nagkukulang tayo ng pagpapaliwanag kung ano ibig sabihin ng itong semantic na to. Kaya doon na medyo nagkakabulahan eh. Minsan yun ang nangyayari eh. Nang nagsisimula ako, yung alam ko sa functional training, a training that's done with a specific tool. Di ba? If ginagawa mo ang training or exercise mo using a specific tool, then it's called functional training.
What do you mean tool? As in exercise equipment?
Is exercise equipment, yes. Sari-saring exercise equipment. Yun ang definition ng functional training. And then as the data progresses or accumulates, malalaman natin na, teka, iba pala, hindi pala yun. Ngayon kasi, ibang-iba na ang definition ko sa functional training when I was starting out. Minsan sinasabi nila, close kinetic chain exercises ka lang kasi yun ang functional. Walang open chain. Kasi open chain hindi functional. They could be true on both ends. Ang alam ko ngayon kasi sa functional training, the way I define it today, based on scientific information, is purposeful and functional. So if a training has a purpose to the individual, then it's functional. It doesn't matter what form it is. We could talk about functional in terms of physiologic need, in terms of biomechanical need, in terms of capacity need. Diba? So any form sa katawan natin na kailangan mo para magawa mo kung ano yung mga dapat mong gawin, then it's functional if tinitrain mo siya. Hindi siya defined by a specific movement, hindi siya defined by a specific tool, hindi siya defined by a specific arrangement of exercises, hindi siya defined by a specific choices of exercises, hindi siya defined by a specific program. Kung ang ginagawa mo will make you functional, meaning pwede mong gampanan kung ano yung maximum na kaya mong gampanan ng katawan mo, kung anong bagay ang gagawin mo sa buhay mo, then it's functional. Yun ang definition ko ng functional kasi. May purpose na siya. So, kung kunyari ang gusto mong matrain sa katawan mo is explosivity, pero ang ginagawa mo ngayon ay strength, I would label that as functional. Kasi the way I understand, you cannot be powerful if you don't have strength. You don't need to go into plyometrics quickly if hindi pa nakuha yung prerequisite na strength mo. To train to plyometrics. So that entire process there is the functional part of the training. Hindi lang yung isang event, hindi lang yung isang exercise, hindi lang yung isang program.
So for people or physical therapists who would encounter patients that may or may not have COVID, how can they assess or at least have an idea probably that this may be a long COVID? Is there already do we have an agreement on what are the things that we should look into in our evaluation and assessments with certain patients that we see?
There's not necessarily like a set thing, but there are like a couple important things. Watch their heart rate, monitor their heart rate, not only when they just come in and sitting and you get their vitals, but with positional changes, with exertion. And exertion can be just receiving a history, just them, the cognitive demand of talking and having to recall things and recall traumatic things. Keep that pulse ox on, watch their heart rate, see how that's changing. We have the DePaul questionnaire, which is from chronic fatigue syndrome, which is looking at symptom severity. There's a lot of questions there's 2 different ones that are available in it. So that's really helpful. But I will add on like the patient end of it. Every time I look at it, I just go, that's so many words. So it might be, I like to point out, it might be us maybe reading it to them or only doing part of it because you're grading, circling how severe your symptoms and all that. But the cognitive demand could be a lot. That's a big thing. It's not only physical, there's cognitive and emotional demand. But that's an option. It's a way to sort of try to quantify the symptoms that they're experiencing. For World Physiotherapy, on the World PT Day Toolkit, they have an activity tracker, which is really great. And there's ways for patients to fill in where their energy level was at. And so it's just like these little kind of check boxes. And on the second page, you can actually make notes of what was going on. But again, I like to point out with that filling out a full day every single day might be a lot. So maybe it's kind of picking and choosing points, because the other thing too, the things we might typically do as PTs, like a 1-minute sit to stand test or like a 6-minute walk or a bird bounce or whatever, may be way too physically demanding. The person might be able to do it in time, but that might cause a crash later on. So you kind of have to look at, it would be good to do these tests that, we do all the time, but is it going to harm the patient? And how much more am I gaining from it? If I know how many times they can sit or stand in a minute, does that matter right now? It might, you could say they do this many now, maybe they do this many a couple months later, but you have to weigh out if they're already describing that they're experiencing those crashes. Maybe we don't want to push those harder a 1-minute sit to stand physical assessment, because that's happened to some of the PTs that have gone to the clinics. They've done these types of assessments and they're just completely drained afterwards. So there isn't, and it's hard because for anybody dealing with insurance, they want outcome assessments, they want numbers on things. Right. And we might not safely be able to do those assessments that we always do. So it's really recording the signs and symptoms you're getting, monitor their oxygen. You have to look to if they're desaturating more than 3%, that's a good indicator to also probably pull back and maybe not push exercise, but monitor their response to activity. Even if you're looking at their heart rate, just at the start of your initial assessment and at the end, and see if there's any changes with that.
I see.
Yeah, and this is just something I thought of, but with the one patient that I saw, it was a lot for her. I didn't even have her try to fill out the DePaul. It would have been way too much for her. But I said, if you can just, at the end of the day, give your day a number where 0 would be awful, literally couldn't get out of bed, couldn't do anything, or 10 would be, this is great, I feel back to my old self. Just overall, give it a number, just to give me an idea of where you're at. And that's something that, should, for the most part, maybe not everybody, be reasonable.
Right. And you mentioned earlier as well to make sure to rule out other
Yes.